The common VTuber. Can't. The Vtuber. Now, let's think about this. Now, in previous streams, quite a while ago, we established a few facts, a few things that we really can't contest. That there is a what is more or less a line of descent that leads from the idol down to the we're just going to use VT. Now, most people would be pretty it's pretty reasonable to say that this is a pretty normal assertion. Now, obviously, you have what is a distinctly more Western, which is the streamer over here. And the streamer itself is one that has its own kind of line of descent, but it also goes over here. Now, which is actually perfectly fine because we're kind of creating something of a family tree, if you will. And so this is what we see in the VTuber boom. So this is our 2020, 2021 period of time. So this is, 2020 to 2020, to 2021. I'd almost actually say 22, to be honest. The question about the boom, I think, is unresolved, really. It's easy to say, but until we see the numbers from that one survey group, we were not going to be able to confirm this number quite yet. So until then, I think what we're going to do is we're just going to say, this is a questionable... Let's make my line a little bit thinner here. This is a questionable number. Now, the what I have observed is that from this point, we have seen what is effectively 3 strands breaking free. So, like I said, we're kind of creating a family tree here. You know what? Let me increase the... I don't use paint. I really don't use paint too often. Okay. Oh, I need to increase the screen resolution. That's why it's fucked. Alright, you're gonna see a bit of flashing for just a moment here. So I do this. Okay. All right. So what we don't care about is we don't care about this part right here. This is the world of flesh. Fleshy. That's fleshies. They got their own thing. They're going all over the place. They got lines. They're going back and forth and all around and making circles and. What is progress? It doesn't matter. They are irrelevant to this conversation. All right. So my observation there then breaks down this into kind of three distinct groups. So what we have is the corp, the corpos. These are the ones that have groups, they have support, they have a no shit business and marketing team behind them. So this is the difference. They have a team. We have the team. Then we have the grouping and the indies. Indie singular, actually. And this is important because this is going to be very different on each one. So the group. The group is a loose association. Very, very, very loose. That's going to offer very limited... so this is the kind of... This is the limited support. But it also offers the personal. And same thing over here with the corp. This offers the personal. Personal, yeah, this is the kind of personal BF type setup. So indie, obviously, no support. They do everything on their own. Everything. All of it. Now, and they are going to start out with limited to no connections, to no ties. Which this is important. This is in many ways a downward force that doesn't help. Now, what's interesting is I kind of want to call him fleshy. And this is so team. You know, you could say something like marketing. So this obviously, this is your Niji Sanji, your Hololive, your V Shoujo. This is where you start to get into more of like Prism projects, the smaller groups that don't quite operate on the same scale, or they're not throwing around quite as much cash. Generally speaking, that their talents may not be pulling in as much as the corpo ones do. So this, and this is the other difference. So these right here, so these ones right here. So these are tied to the Japanese idol market. Now, let's talk about dark truths. This right here. This is what is being tapped into. This is the end goal of all three of these. This is the money. Money, money. This is the fans. It's the and unfortunately the parasocial. With all the idle downsides. Now, this is where one of those points where this line has actually now, to an extent, changed. So let me... let's get some more space here, and I'll explain here. Okay. So there is a sizable argument, which is fair, that this is eroding away. So what I would argue is this: that this corpo has now split itself into two lines. We now have more or less. Hold on, let me redraw this. This has gone into two directions. What we have here is the JP. That's really big. We got the JP, and then the EN. And this is a difference in attitude. Which way you decide to go. And it is not always consistent. It is, in fact, remarkably inconsistent. But this has, when you head towards the EN side, you're going to see less idle and more of a, you'll see more Western influences. So this may appear and take more of a kind of Western influence. So, in terms of necessarily the topics that people will cover, but they're willing to have a bit more of a frank discussion. There's usually less restrictions, which is itself both a blessing and a potential curse. So, JP, you're still in the idle. So technically, you could say less idle. Less idle, but now I'd say this has become more streamer. So they've actually started to reach back up into here to an extent. So we could easily make the argument that they did something like this. Actually here. So that this more modern JP is looking towards the streamer, liver, to pull some information from. Now it should be noted that this would also be true for our EN, who is also going to be pulling from this. But I feel to a certain extent that's potentially redundant, but I don't know. It's kind of up in the air at the moment, because this right here, this is interesting because what you've seen is so you see a lot more. Let's call it, yeah, let's call it this. So we got interaction outside the VTube sphere. So this would be things like game shows. So this would be your Ludwig's. Ludwig. Just kind of game show in general, right? Now I should point out, this is very abstract. This is like the highest level. If we start to think about it, you know, this kind of like one of those Russian nesting dolls. Here's our VTuber right here. We're talking about like this level. Actually, we're talking like this level right here. This kind of second one. You know, this is the like human experience. This is the like a community. Yeah, so something like that. You know. very high, well out there, right? So, JP, to a certain extent, there's an interesting phenomena with mixed reality. And these two are kind of... This is only true to some extent. This is only really true to a certain extent. But more or less, this is where the big money is still. Yeah, objectively speaking, taking the JP approach to being an idle streamer, that's the big money. So if we went for the let's call it the idle streamer. Here we see, and I'm going to borrow from Niji Sanji here, but this is the liver. Live performance, live art, etc., etc. Now, let's talk about some interesting other bits that I've noted. Let's make this bigger. Hang on, everyone, making it bigger. So I think I'm just gonna work my way down. It'd be easier this way. Okay. So, one of the interesting things right here is they have a, let's call it, kind of the next tier down is going to be the, how do they address the topic of, actually no, we'll leave that for now. So writ large, we're looking at what is over here potentially a very saturated market. Why? Because Twitch viewers are loyal. Like 3+ hours loyal. Which raises a very interesting question about them. Where show becomes a dividing factor is pretty interesting too. Like where does it become a show, a production versus a hang on, I don't know on that one, but so let's now the thing that I have noticed with this is that your JP only really seems to go down, especially coming down the Corpo route, remember. They seem to come fully formed. They have everything set up. They're really ready to go. They hit the ground running, and they basically don't stop. Or they do stop because they fail, and you're left with that. But the EN seems to have no... so these guys are... This is kind of your backed with money. There's already a certain level of investment that's been dropped in. And, you know, it's reasonable to expect a return. You know, there's kind of a expected return here. Expected return on the VT's actions. On the VT investment. It's a business decision. And that's the key word here. This is all about the biz. Here. It's the biz. Oh, shit. You can't actually see that. That's right. I think. Okay. I need to remember to keep scrolling down. So, here... it seems like... and I think it's kind of slowed down to a certain extent, but we don't really know what this looks like yet. None of the kind of bigger VTuber EN groups have really, outside of Niji Sanji, seen where exactly this line of descent goes down. This line here is a bit of a mystery right now. You know, why? Simple answer, it's only 2 years old. We literally do not know what is going to happen here. The reason this exists is because prior to... So before... Hold on. So before 2020, we have Miku. No, not that. Miku and Kazuna Ai. I'll just call her Ki. And Kazuna Ai. And what do? They prove the Japanese market will accept, let's say, will accept this tech. And this is really important. They will in fact accept this tech as a form of entertainment. So, with this in mind, it's only logical that they know that this is a truism objectively. So they have no problem going here and going, yes, this is good. We like this idea. Now, and this right here, our kind of EN corporate, has an interesting, very interesting tension that we'll talk about when we move into the group in Indies. Now, the important thing here is that these two lines really do come together, I would argue, in terms of descent. And it seems that there is a bit of, let's call it a kind of primary divide, which is the question of, actually, let's put it here. The question of lewd or not. Now, there's definitely an argument to be made about the 18 plus and the whole talking about category, adults making adult jokes type of thing. So this is a thing that could factor in. Let's lewd or not. Okay. So now that we know this tiny little bit here. So we have lewd. Yes. All right, and then we have lewd. No. Okay, fair enough. This is a personal choice. This is personal. This is personal. And they're both equally valid. Now, I'm going to say, I am not going to be specifically attacking anybody if I talk about something that's incidentally related to something you do. It is merely incidental in my observations. So, we have lewd yes, lewd no. Actually, this would be a better way to depict it. Now, this does affect design. So this does have a... there is a design element in play here. Now, that brings us back to the question of the choice of artist. That plays a lot of... that's going to play a lot into what the final product will be. If you decide to go with an artist who does more, say, hentai, don't be surprised if you end up with more hentai design to a character. You go with somebody who does a more realistic, you end up more realistic. And what I have observed personally is that between these two, there's a bit of a wall. There's a bit of a divide. And it's not necessarily just a question of nudity, I think. It's also a question of just general content. General content question. What do I mean by this? In general. So this could also be called lewd, but this could also just be called adult. So this is going to be your things like drinking. If somebody smokes or vapes while they stream. Stories told. Often involving... no, you all know the word. And the surroundings. And supporting types of stories. So in general, the topics are adult. They are we can call it the 18 plus. All right, I need to use the bathroom, so we're just gonna take a very quick break here. I will be right back. Alright, I just realized that I did forget something. Specifically, over here. Where's my, come on, where's my stylus? So this right here is, in fact, this is a job right here. This, yeah, job. This is a job. This is a no shit. Like, you have expectations, you have responsibilities, you are part of a corporate structure. It's a job. Job. Over here, what we have is hobby that can sometimes go to job. And these two are what these guys are. Your groups, your indies, that's what they are. Now, remember, groups are very informal. So these are kind of, we just call this informal. Yeah, they're very informal. They're not necessarily solid or contractually binding, but they can be. And this job right here, this changes a lot. This is guaranteed. At this point, you know, these two groups sit between here and here. They are both entertainers. You don't, there's no two ways about this one. You're an entertainer when you get to this point. Yeah, you can, over here, you have entertainment, yes. You have entertainment on this side, but you don't necessarily, are not necessarily an entertainer. Yeah, you could be making content. Is that necessarily entertainment? That's another divide. Which is actually a very interesting one because I would argue that somewhere between like here and here, we should actually have another line that goes off way the hell over here, which is the, you know what? I need to make a little bit more space here. This is why social sciences are hard. Because you end up drawing things like this, trying to make sense of it. Because on top of the elude or not question, you have the stream, or you know what? Here's what we'll do. We'll do this. We'll call it this. This is the streamer. Over here we have the content producer. So what is the difference? Streamer? Not necessarily. It's not always about the material. And I should note, while we're saying each of these is a different sub generation, it's not unrelated to each other. They can all be intimately tied to each other. But the content producer, it's about the material. So it's about the material, the mats, the clips. It's about the VODs. Now here you could easily say the streamer, it's about the interactions. So this right here, your kind of streamer, this was the Among Us. This is the Among Us type of group. The social experience about Among Us and these types of games this is where this really shines. Now this is good for audience building. It's a plus for exposure too. But it's not always about the dollar for this group, though. There can often be, why? Well, this is often the question of loneliness. Lonely, and activity, this is kind of what feeds into here sometimes. When you go over to the content producer, though, there is a certain, it's about the game. the game. So this could be YouTube. This could be TikTok. You know, VODs. Anything that can be monetized. Monetized or used to support. Or used to support the dollars. Now, it's important if we take a step back, because if we head over to here to the content producer, and here's where you're going to get to quite the divide. This is fundamentally different than your corpo. Your corporate group is already going to be paid. They have their obligations, yes, but they also have a steady paycheck. When you come over to this side, there is nothing steady. Now, so technically, what you could see is this group here. You know what? Actually, this would be better. This right here would be better going this way. And I need to erase. And not going this way, I think. Yeah. Hell, I'd almost say this is like the child group, actually. That's an interesting debate, because you could put it here, or you could go... Actually, no, I would say this would actually go underneath it. This entire block here. This entire block, the lewd or no, will actually... should more or less go right there. And then over to here too. So yeah, that's a better arrangement. I'm not going to change it though, because I've already written it out. So the next kind of question, if we're going to work from here, is what happens when we moved them? All right, we got a content creator. Content creator has decided lewd or no. That's going to affect the type of content they make. You know what? This music is not helping me right now. Oh, fuck. Let's use this one, I guess. I just need like I just need like a lo-fi mix, that's all. Hold on. I need a proper... Okay. Alright, there we go. So, this is where things get to become very, very interesting. The lewd has several tiers out of it. So if we're going to head out from our ludity group, somebody who's kind of decided to follow down this route, they want to be able to talk about these things, right? So we have two. We have the... let's call them... You know what, let's try to make this straight again. just to make things a little bit more, a little less chaotic here on this chart. So what we have is the true, and we know what this is. This is the kind of true 18 plus. This is the hub of asterisks. Yep. You know, this is the true 18 plus. And yes, there are VTubers here. You know several of them, most likely. Yeah, it's hard not to be aware of some of the controversies some have caused when they emerged onto the scene. Then we have the kind of just, this is just the, let's call them the just adults. Adults talking for and to adults. Now this line, I'm not going to go any further. All right, you know where this goes. It's as simple as that. You know. You know what this is about. This, however, I think is the most common path. This is the, I would say, kind of the primary path that most will want to take. Where, yes, they can be lewd. They can be focused on content creation without going into this category. But most are going to sit between here and here. You can generally tell how things are going to play out pretty quickly based off of, you know, what is this person's, what is their YouTube numbers. You know, also metrics like your Twitter, TikToks, this is where you're going to see, you may see a lot of focus here. Because the end goal is here, there is money to be made. It's hard to deny there is money to be made here. Now here, what there is there's a need for growth. So they need to grow. So this is the kind of, this is the partner, this is the YouTube monetized gang. And then that leads down into the money. The difference being, this is going to be fickle. So this is fickle right here. This is going to be a very fickle number. Fickle until a certain size. Which then leads into stability. Large will equal stable. And let's be honest, it's stable numbers. It's as simple as that. Stable fucking numbers equals money. But also, this is where expectations actually loop back towards this side. Because in effect, when you hit the large size, you are now expected, to a certain extent, to be as good as somebody who has all of this support. But the difference is, yes, like them now, you have, when you hit down this point, in theory at least, you have people. So you can get or build support teams. This is what you actually see with some of the bigger streamers that have been very successful the last few years. They've built teams and they've moved on from their original forms of content into different types of content. So they'll have people who will go and edit their videos, cut their videos for them, do that type of thing. You know, this is the "you have made it" category. You know, this is the "you made it." You know, this is let's call this our 1% club. Now, this is more or less like the final ambition. Everybody wants to go down this route because now you can do basically anything. Because this is freedom right here. Other than expectations, you are free. Now, this is the "you have won" monopoly. Here. This is freedom. Yes. You're 1 in a million, quite literally. Quite literally. Now, we've got one hell of a list here, that's for sure. And, in fact, actually, it won't all fit onto the screen right now. Here. There we go. Even then, it barely works. Okay. But the thing is, most from here will never make it to this point. They'll never make it over here. Most are going to go this way. They're going to go into the, what we're going to call this, you're going to end up in a niche. You're the niche VTuber. So this is going to be your kind of art. This is your a singular game. Actually, no, not singular game. It's better to say focused. Focused on one game. Et cetera, et cetera. So you start to see that you carve out a kind of niche for yourself. And you kind of have the default. So this could be something like League of Legends. You could go Apex. Pretty much anything, you know, if you're in the MMO space, you know, it could be Lost Ark or something like that. Simple as that. Most, if we call this the kind of the 1%, this is going to be the 99% that make it. Because this is hard. This is hard. Growing the audience because you don't have... So, to get from here to here, you know, the marketing matters. Market, growth, time, focus, and luck. Like, holy fuck, luck matters so much. Luck here, probably just one of the biggest. And then that will determine if you actually become that kind of representative in this kind of space. So that's how I see most VTubers going. The group one is interesting. If we go back to here, we have our little groups over here. Because a lot of them are looking at the corpo, it seems, and wondering, how do we get from here, you know, having established usually one of these two groups. So the corpo is looking at it going, all right, so we've got some of these, we got some of these, but how to get to the corp? You know, how do we get the resources? How do we allocate funding in such a way that we can sustain our own growth as a business and that of our talent? And that is a very, very interesting question, because that brings into the business question, which is, are you talents or that is not, or are you best friends? Now, you can be both, but you could also be neither. And as some people say, it may not be the best thing in the world to go into business with your friends. Now, not everybody's interest is the same in, say, monetary compensation for their time. Yeah, not every streamer, not every content producer is actually interested in money. Yeah, money is questionable always. The question of let's put it down here. So we got the question of the Q of dollar. It's not necessarily a binary, but it is a yes/no question. And there is a lot of saying, all right, well, are they a yes, or are they a no, or are they a yes, or are they somewhat a yes, somewhat of a no? And that's the same thing you have to answer here, because it's like, all right, sometimes the best business decision may be kicking the best friend out of the group to bring in somebody far more talented, or more strategic, or doing a renovation on a character design that somebody adores, because you can do the market research and say this is an objectively better design. You know, the market has shifted. Granted, we are only we're at what, +2 years now, so yeah, market shifting probably. Market shift changes. Old is new. Old is new. New is old. Now, not everything works quite the same way. This kind of comes back to the question of kind of ludity, actually. Because, let me give you a concrete example. So, we come down into here. So we got the kind of lewd extent question. How much is too much? And this is something that oscillates. It will go back and forth between our 2 points. So this is kind of our very, and this is our none, let's call it. And this is going to be by personal taste. And where exactly you sit on this meter at any point in time, you know, you could easily argue in like 2019, you're sitting over here. Pretty clearly in 2021, we were sitting way the fuck over here, you know, in 22 early. I'd say we were sitting maybe like here. Actually, recently. So actually, let's call this some. This is a summer, but we'll get this thing back. Some would argue actually that this is actually even further over than where we were at during the thirsty phase. But I'd argue it's actually cyclical. And it is a cycle. This is the cycle that is actually being undertaken here. So let's make this larger. So yeah, cycle very much matters because, and this little example here. This is a community driven. So this is a community driven. It's very much going to be driven by the actions of other people. A joke gets out of hand, it expands, etc., that kind of thing. So, what I have observed in the last, so I have 8 months as active. But what I have actually is a year of observation. Actually, a year plus. A year plus of observation here. And this is what I have noticed is the cycles, everything is a cycle in one way or another. Everything is a cycle. Why? Because of engagement. Now we're really starting to break down over what the Vtuber does. And this is the big one. Engagement. It's an easy way to say this. No, it's not necessarily engagement either. That's actually wrong. Engagement is a component of it, but the big one really is exposure. It's about getting exposure of your avatar. Why? Because the avatars, or rather the art, draws in the curious. It's as simple as that. Art draws in the curious. And it kind of applies a philosophy of if 99% of all dislike you, the 1% is still hundreds of thousands or millions of people. It's still 100,000 plus, even 10,000 plus. Doesn't matter what the number is. The number is irrelevant here. And this is important. They like you. Now, most will either not know what's going on, so have no way of liking you, no way of knowing you exist, knowing that they like you. Some will, by circumstances outside of their control, not be available. So in reality, you kind of end up with something like, you know, 1,000. 1,000 are active. You know, you can say active, and then you can kind of break that down even further. You can say, oh, yeah, you're down to like 10. A mere fraction of that. Hey, Steve, how's it going? Oh, I should actually finish that. Put that over there. You know, just putting all my thoughts together on the entirety of the VTube in VTube scene and a bit of preparation here. Oh yeah, this is a test model. This is, yeah, it's a test model. Taking it out for a bit of a test tonight to see what I need to fix next. So yeah, not all the hair physics are working, but it's getting in the right direction. It's kind of funny. Vroid 2. Or Vroid Alpha, or whatever the hell the actual release number is. Male avatars keep on coming out looking like Link, regardless. Without using any custom skins, you really can't get and then it looks distinct. It doesn't look like it's straight out of a Zelda game. But thank you. It's a work in progress. You know, the perfect is the enemy of the good. So it'll be iterated on, and yeah. All right, so my this is like insane, like scrawlings of a madman. Okay, so putting my thoughts together, because what I've always been curious is how communities are interconnected. And now I think we can come back an hour and 20 minutes later, back to where we started with the streamer livers to a certain extent. And their influence when you start to get to this community driven, because let's face it, Twitch has a bit of a kingmaker system. And this comes directly down into here. Case in point, we have the good old hot tub meta. Oh my god, I really hate paint right now. This is the hot tub meta. And there was that very brief card opening meta too. That was very short-lived. So now we have, and it's not surprising actually to see this, because you know these two things exist within the same sphere of, and the same environment as each other. So naturally they're going to be pulling off of each other. And this is where we start to see people making interesting decisions, if you will. There's going to be a I guess you could call it a form of king making that is then going to emerge, because you have this community driven, but you're also going to start to pull from here. So you have these ones who have made it, you're kind of 1%. They're going to be chasing the meta, not necessarily because they have to, but because they can. But because they have this factor, they have the freedom. I don't think so. They have there's a certain degree of freedom that you got when you hit this kind of 1%. Suddenly, now you can define this to an extent. And this is what I like to call your pillars. These are those who become completely and utterly indispensable individuals. So this plus this equals what I will call a pillar. So what is a pillar? The pillars are, these are your movers and the shapers. They are the ones that will define where the community writ large will be moving towards. Case in point, when Vebe put out her new, or released her new model to the world, that was absolutely amazing with the extensions and plugins that it has. That was a movement. You need only look at the discussions that were had amongst the LTD artists and the riggers about that, and to see that there was an actual no shit movement about those models. One that hasn't been had, I think, in quite a while. That is the action of somebody who has been effectively given a very shittily drawn crown. It's also why, and this actually gets to a very what's the word I'm looking for? Interesting concept for human development that one really only observes when you remove yourself from the space. Because when you have a pillar of something, what you start to see is that this creates a arch. It creates a, let's call it, for lack of a better word, we are basically looking at a wall. And what we have is our pillar, or perhaps pillars, if one will. Then we have a keystone, something that will hold our arch up. But then all around here, you have larger stones. And you know, the kind of the keystone, in a certain extent, this is your Twitch. This is Twitch as a platform. So here we have the pillar. And then in here we have all these little stones. These little bricks in the wall. And so here, right here, is where we have our larger VTubers. These are not necessarily the tiny guys, but they're, you know, sizable enough. They're a little polished. They got, you know, they appear to have themselves together, as the meta would say. And then right in here, we go into the tiny, tiny, tiny indies. These little ones in between that make up most of the community as just a factor. You can't move. You can't really argue with that. So here we have. This is our tiny indies. Yeah, here, let's do it this way. So these are our tiny indie VTs that make up most of the community. Now, obviously, you knock out the keystone, the entire vault comes crashing down. It's basic architecture. It's called a keystone for a reason. Granted, this can also be a person, actually. So this could be Twitch or person. Yeah, you could argue this is a certain mover or shaper, that kind of thing. But that's beyond the scope. What ends up happening then is you have your king, but then if we go back to our doorway analogy, we now have our larger V. Okay, I think part of the problem is I need to kick the size. Okay. So we have our larger VTs. So if you think about it, kind of moving down, and then we have our tiny ones, and then you have basically your pebbles. Now these, I would say, these are very much like the mortar. Yeah, between your pebbles are going to be the ones that are going to be. Oh, here we go. I got a little bit of mortar here. Yeah, this sort of thing. These are your pebbles. These are your pebbles. These are teeny tiny little guys. You know, your sub 1,000, sub 100 group. You know, the ones making an effort of it. What does this look like? Quite simply, this is a hierarchy that almost scarily, to a certain extent, mimics actual human development. It kind of a proof of chaos theory in its own way. You know, from a closed system, there will eventually be order of some kind that will emerge. What is that? Another one that postulates if you have a sea of zeros, you'll eventually hit a 1 that will spontaneously emerge at some point within a fixed closed system, which this very much is. You know, the audience is limited, so there is a limited. There's a limited audience. And we can't, there's no changing this. This is just who knows you. Are they going to be a part of this group? What's going on with the model? Okay. So, having kind of broken this down, this is where I would argue we are at today. That the pillars have been established. We have an emerging hierarchy. How do I know this, though? Have you looked at Vtuber Twitter recently? What you're often going to see are going to be comments that are more or less going to look like this. They're going to be making the I am big or actually here, big or small. And afraid to talk to bigger or smaller creators. This sentiment I have seen multiple times. But, and often there's a caveat that's added, but I'm not too big. not too big, small, and then usually there's a kind of a personal appeal. There's a personal appeal here. It doesn't take long to find these things, annoyingly, but it seems to be very prevalent. This is more or less the quote you're going to see. What does that tell me? That tells me that this hierarchy has started to emerge. That there are social rule. There's more ways and folk ways that are emerging. So there are there's a form of a society forming. There is a society forming. Why does that one matter, you ask? Well, the answer is simple, but we're going to need even more space. Because Professor Revel is in the house, and oh boy, we got even more to do. This is gonna really probably piss people off if they ever watch the entire thing, but honestly, okay. I legitimately, if you watched this entire thing and you're at the 1 minute or 1 hour, hold on, if you're at the 1 hour 37-minute mark at any point, leave a comment when I put the video up on YouTube, at me on Twitter, Discord if it's up. Just if you make it this far, hell, even DM me. I want to meet the mad people that would listen to me ramble for 120 plus minutes. Now, this is indicative of society forming. Yes, this does mean that legitimately, if you wanted to be the Joker, you can. This is Joker approved. English, on the other hand, is not. This is Joker approved now. Joker approved VTube. There we go. I am not responsible for my actions. Joker approved VTube now exists. Congratulations, everybody. So, this right here is actually relatively, at least from my perspective, new. At least people being overt about talking about it. Which tells me one thing: there is a set of rules that are basically being established. A set of folkways, if you will. Actually, they're not rules. They are folkways. So let's call them what they are. They are just folkways. This is the way things are. Which, these are the kind of your unspoken rules. So these are rules about DMs. They're going to be your how to address, for example, is a big one. Which pronouns people prefer, that type of thing. I should probably note that down. So this is like your pronouns, etc. This type of issue. Then you get into kind of there's some basic expectations. Basic expectations. No, not basic expectations. They're more of implied, actually. Yeah, because at this point they're implied. They're only really folkways. It's when folkways move into, rules that you start to see punishment. That's the main thing, is folkways plus punish equals kind of rules. Why does the law exist? The law exists because the government has a monopoly on force. and can enforce those rules at the end of a gun. But that is beside the point. So there's some implied actions. We looked at some of the debuts, remember, about a couple weeks ago. And we saw a few very interesting things. Regardless of if somebody were a corporate VTuber or an indie. So what we would put in the implied actions, we're going to start to see things like the ever so lovely debut screens. You know what I'm talking about. These are the likes, the goals, that type of thing. And it's kind of implied that these are actions. Now, none of these are set in stone. These are not set. They are very, very fluid. Case in point, why do I say this right here? Fluid? Well, what was it? It was the IRL versus VTuber Booba. This right here. This is something of a game changer because it introduced this fluidity. So what we had is digital, in fact, going fleshy, let's call. Digital goes fleshy. Interesting, because now we have looped right back to boom. They now have a body to look at. Interesting, no? Yes, very interesting. Now, there are other implications of this that I don't feel like discussing right now because, well, they are things that require a lot more explanation. So we're at the period we're somewhat setting up the folkways. So there is a few things that I have noted here. So here we have the kind of let's call it the Twitter. There's a Twitter the Twitter game, let's call it. There's also the Avatar game. The Avatar game. This one I do want to touch on very, very briefly, because we are talking specifically about this. So a female presenting will equal faster growth. In general. Just in general, not a lot that we can say about this other than it is true. It is not necessarily always true. Yes, Luxium does stand in the exception right now for this. But as it is only a sample of one, we don't know if we can actually draw a trend from it. The other Avatar game, there is the 2D v 3D v PNG question, which every single one is completely valid, but not necessarily in the eyes of the viewing public. Which, you know what, I want to add that in there because so they are not actually here we go. So in the public eyes, and this is very important, in public eyes, because to a certain extent, I'm going to make this assertion right now. And this is technically, I think, a folkway right here. So, Twitter is for VTube business. Actually, what I'll say is Twitter Discord. But it is sometimes easier to find and meet people and open the initial communication here. Is for the YouTube or for the VTube biz. It's an easy promotion platform, but it's mostly VT to VT. It's not necessarily VT to fan. It's a bit of a professional club, if you will. You know, you follow another VTuber, you know that there's a certain set of, you know, you're a VTuber, you have a similar set of experiences I do. So in public eyes, this is a personal choice. Not everyone will find every avatar appealing. So, e.g., we're going to look at things like male versus female, voice, model, design, which apparently, I was a bit surprised to learn this myself. Apparently, there's actually a lot of people who don't like, who are not fans of the uber sexy. So like this, we'll call this the too sexy, or you know, not enough. And you know, you'd also run into questions like, your lolly would fall under here. You know, this is the personal choice side of things. Do you like those sorts of things? Do you not like those sorts of things? And that's the avatar game. This matters. And then art, just the art quality. You know, a lot. It's hard to judge this one, but there does appear to be, there's an interesting story here. There's a very interesting story here, but I'm not entirely sure about what the story is yet. I don't know the whole thing yet. I guess that is true. What is the whole thing? What is the whole story? Like, I can tell you as I understand it at present, which is there is a certain and this may be relevant. Okay, come on, let's go over here. So yes, there's a certain story to this regarding success, about setup for success. Now, what do I mean? What do I mean? Well, oh, this is actually a folkway that we need to add in here, which is the concept of the VTuber family. Now this is getting, we are so far down the meta rabbit hole, it's ridiculous. I think my Coke is flat. It was bubbling when I poured it. It's been sitting out for almost 2 hours now. Ugh. So we have this interesting family concept. So you have the artist plus other works plus the artist's other works. You got the rigger. And then there's a couple others always. So yeah, you have mother, father. Then you have here we go. I'll write it out. But the mother, father, and you have your the siblings. Now it's an interesting phenomenon that you often see people who do end up getting models from the same artist at some point do have a line of communication with each other. It's like on a meta level, this is seems to be a very powerful force. Now this isn't surprising because what I think we're looking at here is actually the concept of a found family. Which given... okay, how do I touch on this very gently? Given the nature of trauma, Vtube is a natural it's a natural safe space, really, objectively speaking. And this leads into this kind of found family mentality. Which, if you think about it, does take half a step back and remember where we've come from. We've come down from this pillar. Now, remember how we were talking about the emergence of hierarchy? Well, does that play a role here? I would say very much yes. There is a phenomena that I do recall hearing about, which was some artists refused to work with indies and just random people when it came to making VTuber avatars. They were very specific that they would only work with a corporation, and that was it. Now, ironically enough, many of those corporations, VTubers, have ended up here. They are what we would define quite happily in many cases as pillars. This is not a referendum on the nature of power, of course. Thus far, I think we've been very lucky that nobody has abused their position. Though I'm not sure how many people are actually aware on like a meta level they're actually sitting at the position. And we haven't really had nefarious actors that have reached this level that have actually been able to truly get away with the more heinous acts. We have had some at this level that have decided to abuse their positions. Now, but what this means is what this really is artists can, to a certain extent, of course, create a... artists are, in fact, creating a meta family. Or a dynasty. That's right. They're kind of creating these built-in meta families. So somebody who has a high-quality artist, arguably, in terms of exposure, they're going to see a good amount of advantages. So that they may never start as a tiny, tiny little pebble VTuber. They may start and then immediately spike up. So this right here, what it's doing, it's basically going to say, we'll say, it's going to cause a spike by prestige alone. So if you have a model that was made by a famous artist who had done other work for a massive VTuber, you're more likely to skip over it, and they basically end up over here very quickly. So artists have their own... This is a power base right here. So there is a form of power that has manifested. Why? Because 99% of all VTubers are dependent on them, on the artist for basically everything. Overlays, emotes, the model itself, the rigging itself. Most VTs need their artist. Now, this is not all. However, the fraction that have done all of it is pretty small. Very small, actually. So there is, in fact, at this kind of pillar, there is kind of a second tangential pillar, if you will. There's kind of an artist pillar. And this, I would say, could lead into something that's a bit of like a, kind of an artist pillar. You know, if you think about that, that's like a second doorway in and of itself. Similar structure, maybe, I don't know. I don't know entirely enough about the VTuber adjacent art world to say quite that much yet. All I can say from my experience is I just, do things. Now, found family. This becomes a kind of self-reinforcing. This is a self-reinforcing concept. Once you found one, you start to make the question of, can I find others? So this is very much going to be a it's a self-reinforcement, but it's also it's kind of a coping mechanism, actually. Especially if one is somewhere up here where they're more focused on, say, content creation. Finding somebody else who understands where the fuck where do I go? There we go. Yeah, over here. So somebody focused on streamer versus content production is going to be very interested. And oh my god, this really does look like a college whiteboard. So, other streamers versus no, and content creators. So, having now kind of established that part, we see these folkways that are emerging. And they will eventually, by virtue of having a wider structure that's informing them, what these are going to do is they're going to eventually change. So they will undergo a period of change. And then they're going to solidify again. And then they'll change again as the pillars change. And at some point, what this will eventually become, if we just say there's time here, actually here's what we'll say deep time. They will manifest as the standards and practices. S&P. The standards and practices which will, by the nature of power and as history has always shown us, they will eventually be codified into law. At which point they become rules. And then, ironically, rules, after a time, are broken. Rules are rejected. This is when you hit the rejection. This is your rioting. This is your rejection of a societal position, let's say. Case in point, 1960s, the hippie movement, that was a categorical rejection of the previous rules that had existed. And then it will either lead to change, or, more often, I'm hitting the kind of extent I can get this out to. Yeah, it's gonna flash for just a few seconds here. All right. And this will come back to change, and then it will blend into the new folk way. This is like your art communes. This is your bohemian movements. And then look where you've ended up. You're back at the beginning. Something new. Change, though, this is often not. This rarely happens, actually. What usually happens is the rule co-ops the movement. Start that over here. And then that will create what is effectively a new folkway that will eventually, over time, merge back in, become new laws, etc., etc., because the endless vicious cycle propped up by your pillars. Why? Because at a certain point, it becomes simply the way. Right, so how does that apply to Vtuber? Well, it applies because of everything. We are... How big is that? Jeesh. we worked our way from the upper left-hand corner down to the lower right-hand corner. So where do we go from here? So let's talk about the future. That's right, the future. We'll talk about in a couple of minutes. I'm gonna take a break. So I'll be back in just a couple of minutes, so all you sit tight, and we'll go into what will be the final phase of this Revel's dissertation. To talk about the future. And now that I have my tea, we're in a good position to do that. Because there's no better way to talk about the future than over a nice cup of tea. Or a hot coffee. Or an energy drink. This stream not brought to you by G Fuel, but hey G Fuel, hit me up, you know? Let's sell out. Hold on, let me take a nice sippy. Delish. Right. We need to talk about the future. What do I see based off of all of this? What are some of the, not necessarily inevitabilities that we may see, but just what are my thoughts? Where does this societal structure end up going? Well, the big one for me, at least the one I think has the most possibility of changing the entire game, is the platform. Yes, that's right. This is the age-old Twitchy versus YouTube. Dun, 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 dun. Get your tickets now. It's pay-per-view. Pay-per-view. And that's never been potentially more, well, accurate, actually. So this is actually kind of a keystone too. It's a keystone to our approach, let's say. It's a keystone to the field. It's a keystone to all VTubers. Yeah, you've seen it recently about the switches that have been made, where a bunch of people jumped off of YouTube because they were getting banned over to Twitch. Now, the questions of growth, problems here, of course, are there's the growth question. So Twitch loves game. YouTube loves variety. Alright, and actually I should say they also love reaction too. Reaction you can get away with on Twitch, not so much on YouTube. YouTube loves variety and game show. And game show. So, we're faced with this. Now, something could easily swap here. So there is a lot of volatile what we're gonna call them mines. There's a lot of mines that could be easily triggered and blow the legs out from underneath. It's as simple as that. You know, can't really. I don't think you could argue much with that position. What are some of the others? So, the creation of an organic hierarchy. Hierarchies are almost always going to be opposed by some force. The opposed by something, almost regardless of how good or beneficial they may or may not be, how ephemeral or long-lasting they may be. So the natural reaction, so the let's call it the innate reaction. The innate reaction is an appeal to power. Appeal to, actually, it's specifically an appeal to otherworldly power. It's appeal to other, yeah, we use otherworldly. Worldly power. This is religion. That is your, actually no, it's not. That's not technically a religion at this point. That is this. It's an appeal to, it's a structure of faith. Shamanism. This is your shamanism. So that is a thing that could emerge. Yeah, it becomes kind of something of a pillar of power, from which emerges eventually. It's a pillar. It's a pillar. I think I would say that will create a it creates a justification of tradition and an orthodoxy. And an orthodoxy that could potentially emerge. Now, what you can see is that fragmentation is more likely than anything else. So what I would say is the most likely option is actually going to be fragmenting. Basically, it becomes, you'll see some that will categorically reject what a pillar will do. They will say that, if we call this the variety pillar, and let's call this the we'll call this one over here the game pillar. The game pillar, and let's say this one over here is the we'll call this the anime one. So this is your anime. Some are going to say no to any one of these three. They're going to, for whatever reason, say, you know what? Most of my content is between here and here, and here and here, or here and here. And I say, no, not anymore. I am going to go over to here. And what is this over here? Well, let's call this the more extreme example. This is the IRL pillar. And they say, well, you know what? No more. I am now a variety streamer who now does IRL. Interesting one. Why? Because, well, we've already seen the reaction to this one, to a certain extent. IRL. This is a very interesting concept that I don't think anybody's properly drilled down into it. I believe some people have talked about very loosely what is it, the wrestling concept of kayfabe? I don't know. Check out Takahata 101 for that one. He had several discussions about it. But the IRL topic is very kind of an extreme jump. So look, why? Why do we have extreme reactions to this? In part, there are idle cultural remnants, cultural relics, let's say, that still exist within the kind of VTube sphere. Now, these have definitely faded, and will probably continue to fade and may be replaced very quickly. But this kind of extreme jumping outside the norm becomes a chance to move towards, say, a new variant of a folkway. Which, very interesting right here. Because then you're pulling back towards the IRL streamer, and you're starting to see how the entire thing becomes this kind of incestuous circle jerk between all these disparate forces. So why do we have so strong reactions? Okay, the main one is the breaking. I think, at least. There's the breaking of the digital reality. yeah, let's call it the digital reality. And keep in mind, most people, if we go back to, say that down here, the found family concept, in general, when you kind of fall into this kind of traumatic, change is really hard. Change is tough. It is, in fact, a sudden change. Suddenly, that favorite VTuber of yours that you've watched, suddenly you know exactly what they look like. And you can see, oh no, she's hot. Oh no, he's hot. Oh no, they're ugly. They're hot. You know, that type of thing. They're ugly, they're hot, they're ugly, they're hot, or they're a real person. And you're not necessarily going to always have the best reaction to that because dramas. Human minds are not rational by default. But they can be made that way. Dun dun dun. So by default, you're not going to be able to always be rational about everything. What does this mean? This starts the downward spiral that could even knock down a pillar because, oh, what happens? Well, the person loses interest. And then it spirals down and becomes more people. The streamer panics. So, streamer panics. Change content. People leave. New content, not good. New content, bad. And then, in theory, if numbers keep falling, you end up down at the bottom with... And then, yeah, so basically this goes, this goes, this goes. And it just keeps repeating endlessly over and over again until the pillar breaks. And that's it. Oh wait, I'm sitting right in front of it. Hang on. Here. Let me move myself over to here for a moment. Okay. So that is inevitably where the pillar breaks. A retirement, a graduation, something. You know, something's got to give. Something's got to give at that point. And that, more or less, would be what I could foresee happening with some of these people. You know, keep in mind, we're basically at the, 2.5 year mark of the boom in the rest of the world. So we are at the 2.5. Okay, where the fuck did my cursor go? All right. There it is. All right, so we are at the kind of like 2.5 year of the EN and worldwide boom. Now, some would say the boom is already done and gone. I'd actually disagree. Look at markets. Look at the way the stock market works. There are small booms and small busts. And then there are massive ones. The massive ones are relatively rare. However, the big ones or the little ones are much more common. So some people would say, well, a year ago we were in a boom. I'd say, yeah, you were probably correct, but it doesn't mean anything now. In fact, I'd say we're almost headed into, if not in the middle of a boom, another boom right now. Yeah. The COVID situation in some places is seemingly resolving, and fewer people are online, so numbers are different. How much time people have to spend on things, that's going to all change, as you would expect. And so now we're headed into this, well, what's it going to look like in 3 years? What we're really interested in is what do we see at year 3? What do we see at year 5? These are the real interesting ones. Why? Because at 5 years in an industry, you can actually really start to draw conclusions. This is when you can actually tell if a company is going to be stable. Is this startup that I invested in actually going to go boom and become a tech giant, or will it become, well, me blocking my own screen? Or will it go bust in a few days, a few weeks? Or will it just kind of exist or fade away or become something that's just stable enough to endure but will collapse? So that is the interesting bit about VTube, because we don't know what these numbers are going to be yet. Fuck, you can't even see that. Here. Alright, well, point being, 3 years, 5 years, this is what we're looking at. Well, not necessarily what we're looking at. It's what I would say would be the most interesting, and when we could actually just really start to make some assertions about the field and to really establish a true science of it. Now, I know that there's going to be a lot of aversion to that statement. I fully admit the idea of establishing a science, a set of formula, kind of a, an X plus Y, plus, a tweet or a TikTok, squared, a Twitter squared. Yeah, that makes people nervous. There's an idea that it could go down that direction. I would also argue there'd be another one, which would be necessarily bad, but I think you may end up going down kind of the Hollywood approach, where it becomes basically a subset of celebrity culture. It's a subset of celeb culture. Why do I say this? Well, have you looked at the big streamers? They are, especially the ones that have been made, who currently wear the Twitch crowns, they are very well off, more so than most people. And what's the difference between them and, say, most of the Hollywood stars who show up in those silver screen movie thingies? Not much of a difference, at least in terms of monetary. Most of your top streamers are definitely looking at probably like mid, like A and B list actors and actresses. So that's an approach. So you have the formulae that we don't know what they are yet. We can guess. This is what the marketing guys are concerned about, and why personally I think the corporations that are making like specialist VTubers for their model, for their characters and their properties, are kind of probably going to fall apart very quickly, because they want a formula. marketing people want this. They want a formula. They don't necessarily want to be told it's luck. Luck is anathema to a good and well thought out marketing ploy. Every aspect of marketing ploy gets calculated down to the dot to make sure it's actually going to be effective if they're actually careful and actually care. The problem is a lot of apathy going around. Likewise, VTubing needs its own specialty services. So that's actually another thing. So there's definitely a room for the specialties of service. Why? Because you've got gaps in skill. Simple as that. You can't master every skill. You don't have time. But at the same point, that requires the dollar. So, which brings you back to and technically but potentially also over to here. Actually, and over to here. And, oh, well, how does this interact with this, though? So that is a big question. We don't know what the specialties of service is. Is this a folk way, or is it a rejected way? Or does it become a part of this mechanism? Yeah, does Formula plus Hollywood end up creating this solidity behind it? Or is it some other strange combination that emerges? I don't know. These are literally just my observations about just VTubing in general. Like, over the course of the last 12 months, these are my observations. Well, Pearl, this is effectively the start of a proper anthropology of VTubers. Yeah. This is my observations from 12 months of watching VTubers as a community and 8 months within. And it's poorly written because I did it in Paint. It's very, very difficult to really understand. But yeah, basically like 2.5 hour lecture, which is actually a good point. So if you have made it this far, if you made it to the wow, Paint is like not liking the amount of 2 hours and 35-minute mark. Holy shit, you are a trooper. Like, you are amazing. This is the same lecture length of most graduate level lectures, if not probably longer. Holy fuck, if you listen to this whole thing, Madmen. Oh, you know what? There's something I completely forgot to talk about, which I'm not want to cover it entirely, but there is actually a media that is developing. A kind of news and traditional outlet. let's make that. Which is actually very interesting because it opens the door to many of the same problems that we now have with social media and news organizations today. Which that is, I don't think I need to say anything. We all know how that bloody well goes. Terribly. So this is actually a potentially vital component to the future. How our media types, you probably know some of them already off the top of your head if you pay attention to the VTube community. How they start to talk about things is going to matter. It's easy to spread the whole, everybody loves everybody, etc., etc., etc. But the sad fucking truth is that this right here, this is going to have disproportionate influence. When you have people who are putting out videos that are getting 60k views, this will change the mass perception of anyone at any size. That's a lot of power that can very quickly be concentrated within the news. And this does lead down to the paparazzi. I don't remember how to spell paparazzi right now. That leads to the paparazzi, which does, in a certain extent, bring us down towards the Hollywoodification of this scene. So, with that in mind, this would be my advice. If you want to do VTuber news and you take off, be aware, be cognizant, and choose your words very, very, very carefully. Because seemingly innocuous titles of news segments of how you stamp your videos in your timeline, those will create a difference. If you specifically break, your kind of corp with your kind of indie, you have a pretty solid divide. It's no longer just news for the sake of news. It's entirely too likely that by virtue of size and things like that, that this one will then become corp versus indie. And then it gets smaller and smaller perhaps. So it's an interesting space to be in, and something that I think bears some understanding, or at least forethought. Why? Because in general, I would say most VTubers are probably looking at a probably looking at an 18 to 35 year demo, just writ large, with probably most of the content success being towards the upper edge. Let's be honest. And not everybody's at the same point in their cognition and understanding of how social structures work. They may not have ever thought about it, they may not have put the time into it. But, this is a demographic that's still considered that is young. We are prone to making fucking mistakes and fucking up. And we just need to be cognizant of what we're doing to a certain extent. Which, given the way that society has been organized recently, I think we have at least a better understanding. Words matter. word choice and how you present things. Yeah, think about it like a health bar in a video game. Is you know what? Fuck it. That's actually the best way to phrase it. Think about it like the health bar in the video game. And when you decide to drink that Estus flask, do you drink it when you have 75% of your health, 50% of your health, 25%? That informs your usage and the scarcity of it. But frankly, if you're going to go over here and engage in media regarding VTubers, I would fucking hope that you are very much aware of what I am talking about. Because otherwise, you're going to end up creating a rag, an absolute piece of garbage news generation machine that will be nothing but drama bait. And that will not help anyone. However, drama is actually good from an anthropological view. So I do actually appreciate a good drama. This is like the ravings of a fucking madman. We've got Among Us over here. We've got pillars, crowns, numbers, demographics, rejections, social circles, volatile, services, freedom. You made it, the 1%, the 99%, the subversion of social structures down here in the corner behind me. This is just too much. The downward spiral and collapse of basically any VTuber. I mean, this is just mental damage 101. Which it's right behind my head, isn't it? Yeah. the spiral over here. That is not. Yes. Here, let me move myself off the screen here. Yeah. Okay. So more or less, I think this is how I conceptualize the VTube space right now. In terms of, over here we have a bit of a genetics and lineage of descent. Let me get this in, say, red. Yeah. So over here we have something like a genetics graph. So that's kind of our genetics. Then we have a community organization that's the product of it, which comes over here. And digital is fleshy, so this is basically that part. And then we have the folkways that inform more or less the kind of metagame of VTubers. Actually, it would include this. I gotta redo that line. Okay. It doesn't include, it includes basically everything down here, all the way around. Includes all of this. And yeah, so that goes like this. Okay. Then you move into the you have this the question about the booming, where you're at in the future, the role of media and reactionary content, the downward spiral, that is that line, then something like that. Actually, no, that starts up here. Yes. And yeah. And then you create this weird spiral that's probably going to be somewhere down the genetics, but also is in the others, yeah. And then, last but not least, you have things that are kind of individually highlighted. I think like the question about platforms. And where those go, what goes on with that. Does that lead to, say, fragmenting? What did I do for hierarchies? Hierarchies was defined by green. Okay. And then this is green. To an extent, yes. Look, it's somewhere in the graph. I don't know where. No, it's over here, actually. It's right over here. Content, play games, collaborate. Yep. That's your Among Us category. Which is its own approach. But we don't have enough data whether or not we can say it's valid or not, or the best way. That's actually something I should point out. None of this is the best. There is no best way. And this is, I think, the key, and some would argue completely invalidates everything I have said over the course of the last 2 hours and 45 minutes. But there is no best way forward. There's only your way. Because we don't know yet. We don't simply have enough data. And there you have it. The madman's creation of how to understand the organization of Vtubing. Please hold your applause. Or at least the underlying factors that are going to play roles going forward in the future. So. Thank you all for coming to my TED Talk. It's like a long-form TED Talk. I don't think so. Thank you for coming to my VTubing podcast. Yes, there we go. This is as long as most podcasts. All right. I'm going to take a break for a minute. I'm going to get this saved and move a few things over, and we're probably going to play a game for a bit. Ah, no worries, Pearl. No worries. It is a very complex breakdown. I'm not gonna lie. This was closer to a lecture presentation than anything else. And frankly, it wasn't a particularly good one either. If I had to grade myself, I'd probably give myself like a C on this thing. Like I technically did the work, but not that much. But yes, you have encapsulated you've captured the essence of, I think, what VTube is at present, which is make content, play games, collaborate with others to an extent. That one's a bit interesting because it's kind of meta, and I think it comes and goes over how much, but yeah, make content for sure, play games, yeah, and have a bloody plan, and you're good to go. At least I'd say so. I mean, it's still, what, 1 in a million shot that you actually make it, any of us make it. But you know what? I'll take those odds. And I will probably throw this image up on Twitter just for shits and giggles. I may delete it afterwards. This was a part of the this is a part of the scientific process, is writing out your thoughts, getting it all down on, in my case, this case, a really, really bad paint document, and just seeing what I think. And then at some point I'll go through, clean up these notes, make them a little bit better, and start getting some actual concrete information out of them. At which point I'll probably do this all again. Except it won't take me 3 hours to get through my thoughts. There we go. Where is... Long-term research projects are hard. They take a lot of work. And that is very much what this is. So let's just call this Vtuber at the 12-month mark. Raw notes. Alright, looks like they've all shut down for the evening. That is unfortunate. Alright, so I do actually really need to go, so I don't have the time to really mess with this tonight. So, thank you all very much for hanging out with me. I have been your host, Revel. These have been my insane thoughts, my observations, the start of a new science. That is actually what we are doing here. Believe it or not, if you are a part of this process, you are breaking new ground. Believe it or not, breaking new ground. We're going to see just what that means for the future. But I very much need to get going. So I will hopefully see you all again some other time. And we'll do something interesting. Maybe, maybe not. Kind of looking forward to seeing what Twitter thinks about this insane scribbling. I'm going to make sure it's a very low-res image. Have a good one, everyone. Talk to you all very, very soon.